Hello. So my name is Alicia and I'm a sexual health nurse working at SHINE Bolton within the Bolton NHS Foundation Trust. And I'm here with the lovely Mark Mills, the founder of My.HIV. And we're just going to have a chat today, gaining Mark's personal perspective on the beginning of his HIV journey, how he navigates work, relationships, and life living with HIV. We'll also be talking about his work to educate others, and also what we think the future of HIV will look like. So enough of me talking now. Mark, thank you so much for joining me today for this really important conversation.
Thank
And
you for having me. I really do appreciate it very much.
well, we appreciate it. So thank you so much. And please, could you start by telling me just a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Mark Mills, the founder of My.HIV. I also have a day job, um, and I am executive assistant to the Deputy Global Group CEO of an amazing company called Oliver. In addition to that, I am also the executive assistant to the Global Chief of People, also at Oliver, and I have been a business support professional for 22 years plus. And I just about to turn 50 in May coming up next year. So yeah, feeling my bones and my age at the moment, I have to say.
Well, you're definitely not showing it.
Bless you.
You look amazing. So how long has it been since you were diagnosed, and what was the original reason why you went to go and get that HIV test?
So I've been diagnosed as living with HIV since November 2021. So I'm a babe. I'm what we probably consider a baby in terms of how long I've been living with HIV. Um, so it's 2 years. Yeah, it's 2 years. And what happened was that I started getting unwell, and you might, some people might notice there's a little bit of a croak to my voice, a little bit. Um, and what I found was I got laryngitis, and really badly. It was infective laryngitis. I now understand what that was. And it was the pandemic, and I couldn't get to see a doctor, so everything was done over the phone. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And they gave me some antibiotics. It sort of cleared up, but then a week later it came back and with full vengeance. So I had another round of antibiotics. But just as I finished that second round, I was actually emigrating to the Netherlands. And I thought, like, this is stress. It's got to be, you know. I'm a bit of a worrywart anyway, you know, by the very nature of me. So um, I went off to the Netherlands probably about 3 weeks later. And I arrived in the Netherlands, and I'd never felt more unwell in my life. Actually, I felt dreadful. And I went straight to the GP. And the GP was like, let's get used to more blood tests. Because the interesting thing is that um, 6 months before I went to the Netherlands, I did actually have a HIV test, and it came back clear. It came back negative. And so I was like, well, it can't be that, you know. But he called me. He called me shortly after. Went, Mark, I'm sorry to tell you, but um, you've tested positive for HIV. But also, I was carrying two major infections as well, and I was seriously unwell. And that's how I found that I was living with HIV. It was through the body and the immune system really under strain and pressure. Um, and then, you know, the rash came, the fatigue, and all the different bits and pieces that come with it. So that's how I found that I was living with HIV.
And what were your thoughts and feelings going through your head in that moment when they told you that you had tested positive for HIV?
And I don't know if I'm allowed to swear or not, Alicia. So we can bleep it out in the edit if necessary. But let's be honest in this conversation, because I think it requires it. My first thought was, oh fuck. No, please no. I'm going to die.
Mm.
I mean, I felt like I was physically going to die anyway. I felt so unwell because, I had, three different things going on that were untreated for at least 6 months. So when I had my first HIV test, I think I was probably just about to start seroconversion. And I know that we can explain that maybe later, or you can see what seroconversion is. It's when your body onboards HIV, and the process that's there. But it didn't pick it up. And that happens for many people, I understand, is that, you know, you need one test and then you need another 3 months later, at least, just to verify your initial test was right. But you can correct people on that if necessary. But yeah, it was devastating. I just moved country home. You know, I was with the same employer, was still with Oliver. I was still looking after Sharon as her executive assistant, but in the Netherlands. And it was like life. It was like the rug was pulled from underneath me and the sky was caving in. And I have to say that if mindsets were changed, you'll see in the background, mindset. If mindsets were changed around HIV and actually what it means to live and work with HIV in today's world, then I think that initial response from me wouldn't have been as deep, as harsh, and as traumatic.
And how would you say that your feelings have evolved since then? How do you feel about like living with HIV now?
I think there's a process that we all go through. How I understand it is that it's you first, your HIV, your journey and your way. And that is the tagline, as you know, to my.hiv. But yet it's very true because everyone that lives with HIV experiences it very differently. And that can be from how you physically react with it. So if you're symptomatic or not, you know, I spoke to a guy relatively recently. He had no symptoms at all. And even through treatment, he had no side effects. I mean, not a thing. It was like it didn't exist for him. Yet for me, you know, I was really symptomatic. And the side effects were really brutal for me. You know, my constitution isn't so strong, but, you know, and so I found that my journey was very difficult in the physical sense. But yeah, you know, I needed to do a lot of self-care. And actually, HIV's been for me the most brutal experience of my entire life. But it has also been the most incredible, positive, amazing, life transforming in the most beautiful way experience as well. It's been both of those in equal measure. And I almost wouldn't want to live without it now, if I'm honest with you, because what it's allowed me to do is come home to myself in a way that I never even dreamed possible.
And being productive, how did you find incorporating medication into your life with being at work? And did you ever experience any side effects to the medication?
Yeah, you know, the medication was a tricky one for me. Like I said, you know, I was symptomatic beforehand anyway, before starting treatment. And then when I started the treatment, boy, did it hit me. So, you know, night sweats were quite brutal. It was almost every night. I had the worst diarrhea ever. Like, it was really, really tough. Fatigue, you know, if no one's ever experienced like clinical fatigue, it's tiredness on another level. It's tiredness on steroids, if you know. And so I really was symptomatic. But what I found was that I was put on 2 drugs at the very beginning, to really give it a hit, like to really hit me. And it laid me out completely. I couldn't function really. I mean, you know, that counts there. That might as well be strapped to me back. And so then we went through a process of changing treatment. And that within a few weeks turned it around for me. And yeah, 1 pill a day. Getting, you know, doing the pill a day was a difficult thing at the beginning. About the first year, and I've heard this across the community actually for the newly diagnosed, is that You know, you find out when is best to take it for you, when works best for you in your day. I've always been a, you know, take your meds in the morning kind of guy. I did try it at night, but I kept forgetting. So if I wake up, have my coffee, take my meds, I can incorporate into the, you know, my standard routines of the morning. And that worked really well. But what I found is that I was opening my little pot of my meds, and I'd get really, really upset because it would be, I am HIV positive. Again, it was a daily reminder, particularly in the 3 months before I got undetectable. It was a daily reminder, you're HIV positive. Because you know, when you go to sleep, we forget everything and go into dreamland, don't we? And the experience is akin to if you've had a very life-changing experience. So if you've had a bereavement, for example, you go to sleep, you wake up, and then you know you get that, like, it all sinks back in immediately, doesn't it? And that's what taking my med was like for the first year. It was a constant reminder that I am HIV positive, and I needed to find a way to overcome that. So what I did, excuse me, was think about it, and I thought, actually, do you know what I'm going to do? When I take this pill, I'm going to just send out thanks. Thank you to all of the scientists, the nurses, the doctors, you know, that wonderful lady, Francois Barsanusi, she discovered HIV. You know, I'm going to send out thanks. So when that goes in my mouth now, I say thanks, because what they've done is enable my life to continue and lead a, you know, I mean, what's normal, but a normal, healthy, happy life. And now I save other people's lives as well, because it's now impossible for me to transmit HIV into someone else. So not only am I saving my life, I'm now saving others. Like, it's about, I put it into a thanks moment.
That's a really good point. And to be honest, I'd never even thought of it as a way to do that. And I think that's really important for people to flip it on its head and see the positive side of things, which I think you're doing brilliantly. If someone is very anxious about going for a HIV test and reluctant to go and get tested, what would be your advice to them?
You'll know this from your experience. And I was one of these people. I ain't got HIV. Nah, not me. No, that's their disease. They've got nothing to do with me. Look, when I've been through, you know, a life of thinking those things, actually, but also it's been the thing that I was utterly scared of the most. So if you'll go to, you know, some people might call it the clap clinic, some people, you know, might call it all different types of things. But when you go to your sexual health clinic, it's the one thing that I steered away from the most, you know. And, you know, I've had a few STIs over the years. Hey, I'm sexually active. Hey, presto, you know, the STIs are all part of the deal, you know. It was the one thing that I shied away from the most. And actually, what I find is living with HIV is the key is in the words. You live with HIV. You know, there's lots of messages across socials, across media that deliver the whole living with HIV conversation. I believe, and it's a very personal belief, and I'm not discrediting anyone's work, but I believe the messages are somewhat too aggressive. They, you know, which they needed to be for a certain time, but we're moving into a new world, you know, where, you know, without wanting to point fingers, the stark reality is that the heterosexual community are now leading the way in driving HIV infections. Like, you know, the gay community, which I am part of, like, we're taking that tiara off and we are handing it over. Like, you know, get on board. Get on board. because anyone can live with HIV. Anybody who is sexually active can live with HIV. And it's as simple as that. But the key is in the words, you live with HIV. And the reason why, lots of people still rock up at their sexual health clinic and they're offered a HIV test and they go, no, not me, no thanks, not me. Very blokey, about that. It's because of the historical nature of HIV. I'm old enough to remember the AIDS tombstone adverts, and it was delivered as a gays disease, to the UK population, and wrongly so. And all of these years later, you're still seeing people walk into your clinic. No, not me. It's their disease. I mean, the impact of that public health awareness program was appalling. It was absolutely appalling because people are still suffering the effects of it today. And that included me as a gay guy, And I just think about those poor boys and girls, that walk into your clinic and refuse the test because of that very public health message that was given all those years ago,
I agree. I think definitely within the 80s when, there was all of the tombstone adverts, as you said, I do think it was very aggressive messaging, but I also think that there is no media coverage really of HIV and what it is like to live with HIV now. And I think that there's not enough put out there for people to know how much it has changed since then. And I think that people are just very uneducated on HIV and what it is like to live with HIV now, which is why I'm very glad that we're doing this video, because I think it's super important for people that maybe don't know enough about HIV to learn about.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And, I'm of the mind that, HIV, the HIV experience for me, like I say, has been the single most brutal thing of my life. And it's all relative to everyone else, but, I've had my fair share of those already in my life. And it took the biscuit, it took them all, it took them all, the rest of them to the cleaners, quite frankly. Like, it was brutal, but it has been the most positive experience because what HIV does, it did for me at least, was put me in touch with my mortality so deeply that then it provided opportunities for growth on a level I'd never experienced before. It allowed me to look at myself and my life in ways that I never would have done without it. And so what I try to do via my channel and my messages is acknowledge the brutality of it, yet there are some really amazing things that come with a HIV diagnosis that don't get talked about. I couldn't find them anywhere, about the experiences that you have when you have a HIV diagnosis. Because I'm not saying everyone's the same as me, but it's about mindset. And like I say, HIV allowed me to come home to myself in a way that I never dreamed would be possible for someone like me. Because I also live with a mental health condition, I live with EUPD, emotionally unstable personality disorder, or some people call it borderline personality disorder. So I think deep, I think strong, and I experience life through emotion. But actually, what's that's done is I didn't get diagnosed with that until a year after diagnosed with HIV because I was finding the experience so brutally difficult. I almost successfully took my life on 2 occasions. And that was my EUPD because I was rabbit holing the depression about it so much. And then I spoke to my community specialist HIV nurse. She went, "Oh, honey, that's a really big red flag." And immediately loads of support was put in around me. Another benefit of community specialist nursing. And I went for the tests and consultations, and I found that actually I've lived all of my life with this mental health condition as well. But what I found with HIV is that I now put it to some seriously good use. So I don't say now I have a mental health disorder. what I have is a really powerful mind, and so I can deep dive this topic subject, and I find that actually there are so many benefits to living with HIV, and I don't think I've even discovered them all yet.
That's amazing that, in 2 years you've come such a long way in your journey, but it's an amazing mindset to have that you believe that you've still got so long, so much more to learn and so much more to go.
I
And
think so. I mean, I've met so many wonderful people, Alicia, including you now, in this community, and everyone's experience is different. But the one thing that rings true, there's a couple of things that is like threads that run through us, in the most part, at least, is one, it's that sense of community. It's the most fabulous, amazing, inspirational community of humans I've ever had the good grace to be in. But also because of the very life-changing nature of a HIV diagnosis, every single one that I spoke to has come to understand themselves in a way that they never did before. And I think that actually lots of people will probably strive towards that in their lives and never find it. So actually living with HIV can be the most incredibly positive experience.
so talking a little bit off of that now into kind of relationships and work and lifestyle, how have you found approaching the subject of your HIV status with people you're dating, people you're having sexual relationships with? How have you found that conversation to be?
This was a learning curve. So I found that stigma comes in many different ways. Direct and also indirect. People actually don't realize that what they're delivering you is stigma. And so I'll give you two examples. One of the very first reactions I had when I told someone that I was HIV positive, living with HIV, whichever way was that, was, did you not wear a condom? It's like, no, and neither of you, and I know that too. Like, is that really your first reaction? Not, how are you? What can I do? Are you okay? No. Did you not wear a condom? Like the blame, of it all. So that was stigma, but that I was indirect because that's just someone who doesn't have the knowledge around when you are blamed for your diagnosis. The brutality of that emotion is awful, because it's your fault. And it's not your fault. HIV exists. Anyone can get it. If you're sexually active, you can get HIV. It's as simple as that. Now, did I wear a condom at that point? No. Have I worn condoms in my sexual life, in my experience? Yes. And there are points where I haven't. That's life.
I don't think we would have a service, and we would be eradicated as a sexual health service
You'd be out of a job.
if everybody wore condoms. And this is the thing that we like to make very clear to people when they do come to us. These things happen. People get caught up in the moment. People are human, and like you said earlier, if anybody is in a sexual relationship, they are at risk of these infections. It is part and parcel of it.
It is. It totally is.
And the thing that well, or at least I like to get across, is that, you could have sex with one person or you could have sex with 100. It's just a virus, or it is just a bacteria. It just does its thing. It doesn't care who you are, from what walk of life. It just does its job to survive and spreads. And that
It's
is
the most inclusive thing ever. It's the most diverse, equity, inclusion. Like as a virus, it loves everybody and it don't care how you identify it. Like,
yeah.
and it's really inclusive actually, HIV. And so I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. So that was one instance. And then the dating thing. Wow. So I'm single, and I've, been single for like 6 years, something like that. I have just recently started getting to know someone actually. But we'll um, but what I found was when I plucked up the courage, Alicia, to go back online, to the dating sites and the apps, I was shocked at the gay community, because as soon as I mentioned that I was positive, I've been blocked more times than I've had hot dinners. Instant block. And it kept happening every time, every time. And when you're newly diagnosed and you're plucking up that courage to finally get back out there, put yourself on the market, and then your own community, your community of people, but I'm actually positive. Instant blocks. With no conversation, no nothing. It was really tough, I have to say. It was really tough. That instant rejection. If when you're feeling a bit vulnerable anyway, that's always going to hit you. But I was shocked at the gay community, to be honest with you, of how brutal they are around HIV, and how uneducated they were. And actually, those people that block me are the ones that, all fine and good. I don't need no one's approval, but don't make that the reason, because, by doing that, you're telling me that you're dirty, you're mucky, you're not clean. And I see this across loads of profiles. I'm clean. What the hell does that mean? It's the stigma within dating. It's so shocking, it's untrue. So, yeah, I found that whole experience really challenging, actually, when you put yourself back out there.
Yeah. And what do you think maybe could change to make that better? What do you think kind of the community and other people could know that would make that process better for people living with HIV?
Well, I think that it's about going on a journey, right? So I think that if populations historically have believed a set of, they have a set of understandings, and they've been inbuilt within populations for years, they're not going to change that overnight. You're just not. So it doesn't matter how much the holding up of the banners is one way of doing it, really like forcefully driving the issues through. We need those people in our lives, but you can't expect someone to go from 0 to 60 in their understanding of HIV and where you're at. I'm here, they're there. And when you challenge them, you can't expect them to go to meet you. It's a journey. And so it was one of the reasons why I launched my.hiv, is because it's 90-second reels of a normal bloke, like, I live by the seaside now, but like I grew up in Peckham, southeast London, like, see this normal guy, I'm as normal as they come, whatever normal is, and just talking about it in everyday kind of language. And hopefully what that does is just educate people in a really everyday sense, in a really human way. And that's what I like to think that most people need, is just to go on a journey with it, and there are many ways that you can do that if you think about it carefully. Yes, you can hold up your banners and your fire oppression, and you get those really people that force change of laws, and and they're amazing at that. But then there's a way of educating when we could look at schools. And one of the things that I found, because I've been a business support professional my entire life, I've worked with some of the world's most leading global marketing and advertising agencies, is that the one thing that's missing in business is sexual health awareness. And when we're on a surge now of diversity, equity, and inclusion, We're looking at the person first, you know, and you bring your whole self into your work. Then the one thing that I found is missing is sexual health awareness. And actually, what I believe, and I think we're going to talk about this later, but if you don't mind, I'll continue.
Of course.
Is that, you know, when we think about employee wellness, you know, we're really, you know, we've got gym memberships at View Work now, haven't we? You know, we've got, you know, mental health awareness. You know, we're looking at people's identities. You know, we have cooking classes, and, you know, and there's the whole sustainability piece, you know, around people and planet. And what I figured was actually business can be a supercharger towards the 2030 goal of no new HIV infections globally if they input sexual health awareness into their employee wellness programs. So I have actually a framework that I've almost built. And, you know, I'm talking to, you know, people about it. And it's almost like working well, if you will, for, you know, a statement piece. And it's mind well, body well, eat well, money well, identify well, sustainably well. And in that, you look at all parts of employee wellness and what that means. And so in that, you incorporate sexual health into that, because part of self-care today must incorporate your sexual wellness.
Yeah, I agree. I think
And that doesn't mean, you know, the safe sex piece is in it, but it's slightly different. It's about what does your world look like when looking at your wellness.
yeah, I think it's something that's definitely massively lacking, and I think it's massively lacking across the board. I think I personally, any job that I've worked at, I don't think anybody has ever considered my sexual health ever.
No,
So
I mean, because it's a tricky subject, isn't it, Alicia? Like it's one of those, you know, particularly being British, you know, it's a tricky subject. Like I was brought up in Peckham, right? And I was taught by nuns in a Catholic school. My sex education at secondary school was being shown a video called The Silent Scream. Some people, if they of a certain age, will know what that is. It's brutal. That was my sex education at school. It, it's ridiculous. Like, let's put sexual wellness into self-care, because it really is. Because what HIV has allowed me to do is self-care in a way I never even dreamed possible. So it fits.
and when somebody is first diagnosed with living with HIV, and if they don't want to talk to their friends and family and people around them just yet, and they're not ready for that,
Yeah.
what services would you recommend, and how would you recommend for people to find them in their area?
Do you know what? There were two very key organisations that I reached out to, actually. So the Terence Higgins Trust, I spoke to a wonderful guy. He was the second person. Terence Higgins Trust was the second phone call I made after my diagnosis. And I spoke to this wonderful guy. And I don't think they're allowed to use their real names, but I will never forget the name he gave me. That conversation, I will never forget. His name was Radford. And we spoke about it. And he went, Mark, he said, your life, probably for the next 2 years, is probably going to be a bit of a roller coaster. Well, but he reassured me that everything is going to be okay. And so the Terence Higgins Trust, their helpline, don't hesitate. Call them. They're incredible people. And the second one was the Samaritans. When I was in here on my own, and in my darkest moments, I called the Samaritans. I called them once when I was before I came back to the UK, in the Netherlands, and then I called them here twice, actually, here. And they were amazing. They were amazing. They just sat and listened. They didn't necessarily offer advice, but they're trained enough to give you to move the conversation along a little bit. Their training must be formidable because actually, what the Samaritans did was stop me taking my life on one occasion. And so I'm not saying everyone's experience of living with HIV is that, because it's very unique. Everyone's experience is different. Um, but the Samaritans and Terence Higgins Trust, without fail, pick up the phone to these people. They are here for you, without fail.
And I'd just like to add as well an amazing service, but it's more of a Manchester-based service. Is a George's House Trust.
I've heard about this. I know a lady that works there now through my work. They seem wonderful. What's their thing?
So when somebody is first diagnosed with living with HIV, they have helplines and support that either clinicians and professionals can access them for support and materials, but also people living with HIV can also access their support through them, and they are an amazing service. And it sounds like, there's a lot of different avenues with services such as the Terence Higgins Trust, and it's amazing that there is so many services that is catering to this and helping people in such an incredible way. And
Yeah.
I think it's important that you've had first-hand experience with the Samaritans and Terence Higgins Trust, and it sounds like they're doing incredible work, and I'm glad that there's people like them in the world.
And you know what? Do you not think, Alicia, like as we move forward in time, and now that the data that we're seeing around HIV and the drivers of the infection rates adjusting and changing now, and taking a different form, that those services are going to be even more vital.
Definitely.
For the new the new sways of populations that we're going to be seeing coming through with the diagnoses, the support for them is going to be so vital.
Yeah, and I think even in such a short amount of time, thinking back to kind of the 80s and 90s when HIV was first being talked about, and I
Yeah,
think that the support now that is available as opposed to then, and the perceptions of HIV is just incredible, how much it has changed. But
yeah,
I still think that we have a long way to go.
we
Uh,
do.
and definitely talking a little bit more about kind of your opinions on what the future of HIV looks like, and your future as well. Have your plans for the future changed in any way since you got your diagnosis of living with HIV?
Totally. Totally. I mean, the future for HIV, excuse me, the future for HIV is really bright. I mean, who would have thought that we're now looking at a goal to end HIV?
Incredible.
Wow. When I think about all of the forebearers and those people, those I stand on the shoulders of people through my little channel and the work that I'm doing around awareness. I stand on the shoulders of those people. And I always remember, like, the Ashes protests in the States. I don't know if you've heard about those, but you know, they threw the ashes of those people that died of AIDS onto I think it was the White House lawn, to get treatment for people that live with HIV. Like, and then we're looking today and we're looking at 2030, the year 2030, and we're going to be hopefully ending HIV. Wow. How
Incredible.
incredible is that?
Yeah.
So anything that I can do to now be part of that and supercharge it, which I will say again, I think the key is through commercial business, by educating people in sexual health awareness. I think that will supercharge it, and we will reach that goal earlier. If
Uh,
commercial, if global commercial business gets on board with sexual health awareness as part of employee wellness programs, it will supercharge
especially because I know that they've been running some trials in some hospitals where HIV rates are slightly higher, and they were doing an opt-out scheme in emergency departments.
That
So people could opt out if they didn't want it to be tested, but they were testing everybody for HIV and syphilis. And I think that needs to just be nationwide. I think
it totally does.
it's obviously worked very well, and I think that that would just change the course of, you know, the future of
I
HIV.
agree. I really agree with you. And you know, and let's remember, this is not about finding the dirty people in public, the ones that are really sexually active, that have multiple partners and pointing at you, going, "You're a wrong person." It is not about that. What this is about is keeping everyone healthy and stopping HIV. If we could stop COVID tomorrow, would we? Yes. If we could stop cancer tomorrow, would we? Yes. We can stop HIV.
Yeah.
You can't say that about many things in this world. These things that kill people. Stigma kills people around HIV. We have an opportunity to stop this thing. So when you're rocking up in A&E and they're saying, we're giving you a HIV test here and you need to opt out of that, etc. Don't deny yourself the ability to do that, because you can be part of the thing that stops HIV in its tracks by the year 2030. But I'm on a mission. We're going to do it before. We're going to do this before.
And I think I want people to not be nervous about that and not be scared about that. Like, if they're taking your blood test anyway because you're in A&E for a different reason, it's just an extra test, and it's just one extra step in that 2030 goal. And I think that that is massively important.
It is, and it's a massive step towards your own wellness. It's one of the biggest acts of self-love you can show is by looking after your health. Like, we all do our health in varying degrees. And, I mean, I've got a shockingly bad diet. I love crisps, I love chocolate, but we'll try and balance it out. Like, taking a HIV test is one of the biggest acts of self-love that you can possibly give to yourself. It really is. To finish off the answer to that question, how has, changed my life and moving forward in my life? I did an interview in October 2022, and it was, in the business support world by a lovely lady who's been just an amazing friend and advocate of mine, Jessica Gardner, and she is the CEO of the Assistant Room. So she runs this great big body for personal assistants like me. And at the end of that interview, I watched it again recently to see how far I'd come, like, in myself. And at the end of it, I said, I want to talk more about health in the workplace. And that, bringing all of you to work and it should, be all about you first. And so I've kind of just seemed to have naturally continued on that journey. And so I want to do more of this stuff, awareness, education. But I think that business, and I want to do it in business, because I do genuinely believe, when you work for incredible businesses, just like Oliver, full of the most beautiful, amazing people that are forward thinking, and really they understand the benefit, the value of what it is to have a population of people that get on board with this kind of stuff. It can change the world. And so I'd like to talk more to business about the power of HIV and actually what it can do, what it gives you, rather than takes away.
And on that note, in terms of education and the work that you're doing, especially with my.hiv, what is one thing you wish every single person in the world would know about HIV?
HIV can be the catalyst for the most positive, life-changing experience of your life.
It's amazing. I
I mean,
think,
it really can. It really can. Now, I say those words and they kind of like fall off the tongue, right? And anyone looking at this will go, well, it's easy for you to say. Do you know what? It ain't. It ain't easy for me to say at all. I've lost best friends through HIV, of decades worth of friendship through my HIV diagnosis. There's more compounding factors to it, but that was a catalyst reason. I've lost family through my HIV diagnosis. I nearly took my life twice through my HIV diagnosis. It's been, when I say it's been the most brutal experience of my life, I mean, I don't say that lightly. But HIV, I've got to tell you, it is the catalyst for the most positive thing that might ever happen to you. Because you come home to yourself in a way that you may never have done before, and it delivers to you. If you allow it and you do the work, and you're supported to do that work in a personal environment and a professional environment, if you've got those mechanisms around you in place, it can be the most positive, life-changing experience of your entire life. And I refuse to let a HIV diagnosis not be seen as that as well. Because I could not be me today without HIV. And that's only a good thing.
definitely. And it's amazing to hear kind of your whole journey through this conversation and how kind of your mindset has changed since this 2-year journey. And I'm really excited to see, how that looks for you in the future as well.
Yeah, it's a learning journey, right, for us all. You in the service, you know, me as a patient, so to speak. It's a learning journey for us all. And, we have to forgive people their misunderstandings, I think, to a certain degree. You can't expect people to go from 0 to 60, if they're full of bias and stigma and, evil thoughts around HIV. You can't expect them to go overnight to land on your page. But what we can do is be smart, understanding, and bring people with us on the journey in a language that they understand. You have to do this a whole lot smarter than just shout at people. Like,
Yeah.
there's different
And
ways to do it.
I think it's important to get kind of the message across to people that don't know, the U equals U message. If you're on treatment and you're undetectable, then you're untransmittable. And I think there's a lot of points that people who aren't as educated on it don't know. And I think once you kind of tell them all of the facts now, they're like, oh, I think of that differently. Years ago, it would be tons of medication a day. And now for most people, it's 1 tablet a day. And I just think,
Yes,
like, you take more medication for diabetes or
you do.
other diseases now, and I just think that, like, it's just come an incredibly long way, and to think that then hopefully by 2030 we'll eradicate all new diagnosis because of testing and education and prep and pep and other
Yeah.
things. I just think what an incredible journey that it's come such a long way in such a short amount of time.
Completely true, Alicia. I back every single thing that you've just said there. And I believe that actually we need to start communicating with people, not in a new way, but when it comes to sexual health, and wellness. Look at Instagram, for God's sake. It's full of people that want to put good messages out there in the most part. I mean, a lot of it's dark, but when you find a reel and you can connect with that and go, oh, that's me, like, or I feel those things, you know. So, your Shine, Instagram Shine, Shine Bolton, your sexual health service, I come across it and look at some of the stuff that you're putting out. I'm like, yes, I can connect with that. That means something to me. And I'm sitting here, in my pajamas, at night, flicking through reels, and then all of a sudden, there's someone I can recognize, you know? And that's what I want. We need to start doing this more. We need to start communicating to populations. in a way that we don't bore them to tears, you know, but we deliver information in their world, in their way, and how they can receive it easily.
Exactly. And I think
The
that that
90-second reel on your page, how many people is that going to hit? And how many people is it going to start to transform the way in which they think about their own sexual health?
yeah, and that's
Even
again,
if it's 1 in 100, you've done the job.
I think that a lot of people with sexual health can feel embarrassed to talk about it and feel, stigma around talking about and asking certain questions. And I do think, as you said earlier, sex education in schools isn't as good as it could be. And I think that now that is, like you said, that's where people go for information and that is where people will look for things. So I do think that that is massively important. And
It's part of the mix, isn't it? It's all part of, getting all these tools together. It's not the tool, it's just one tool, but a very, very helpful one, I find. And that is the reason why I started my HIV as well. Because when I was sitting here on my own, never feeling any darker physically or mentally, I couldn't find anyone that I recognized. Not in terms of, identity, but in terms of who was speaking about HIV, the way that I was feeling it. It just didn't exist that I could find. So let's all just put let's get these messages out there. You live with HIV, it can be the catalyst for the most positive change in your entire life. And you don't have to be all shouty about your sexual health. You want to be private, and keep it to yourself. Good on you. Like I rate that equally too. But awareness is the key, and education is the key, and all just being a little bit bloody nicer to each other is the key.
yeah. And if um say my friend was diagnosed as living with HIV tomorrow, or one of your friends come to you, what advice would you give to somebody to support that person?
First thing, everything's going to be okay. It really will. Everything will be okay. Because the void that you see or the cavern that you see in front of you when you get your diagnosis, whilst completely understandable, isn't actually real at all. Because there's every bit of support around you from a clinical perspective, and a community perspective that will give you the wings you need to fly. So don't worry about that. Everything is going to be okay. And secondly, I would say that HIV does require your engagement. It requires your engagement and your sustained engagement. And I know that lots of people go through their HIV journey and they drop out of, you know, therapy, or they might drop out of taking their meds. And it's a really difficult challenge for you clinicians to get them back on board. And so, that second piece of advice would be engage with your HIV and engage with the healthcare professionals that are around you, because they have got your back. They have completely and totally got your back. They know what they're doing. And if you don't think they know what they're doing, then they are open to challenge as well. And they listen and get engaged with your HIV, because, it requires it.
I think that's massively important. I completely agree. And I think that that's a really great piece of advice for somebody who, may have no experience around the topic and may not know how to support, their friends and family. So I think that
Yeah.
that is super important. On a final note from me,
Yeah.
what would you say the NHS and HIV services within the NHS could do better? And what does the perfect a HIV service look like for you?
Don't think there's a perfect one. Nothing's perfect. And actually, I'm a great big fan of imperfectly perfect in all things in my life. So, nothing's perfect. What I will say is that I think that my experience lent itself towards me thinking, talk to the person first. So, a couple of the reels that I put out, when we're talking, employers finding ways, how do I engage with someone who's presenting with a HIV diagnosis? Talk to the person first. And I would say that to the doctors and clinicians. We know that you've got our backs from a clinical perspective, from the biological perspective, we know this. That's why we're with you. But actually, I would, near as damn it say, the first thing on their mind, that person's mind, when they're newly diagnosed, is how it's changing their life as well.
Yeah.
What am I going to tell my girlfriend, my boyfriend, my partner, my housing situation, my financial situation? Like, a HIV diagnosis can change every single element of your life, and profoundly so. Talk to the person first. How's life? What's the relationship like? What's work like? How the friendships going? How's the money situation? All those things change. So I think that my lovely friends in the NHS might do well to approach from a you first perspective about your life, because that you've got our backs in it from a clinical perspective. You've got that down. We know that, but talk to the person first. I think that would make a really big difference.
100%. I think that is the way forward, to just look at, like you said, the person as them, and look at them holistically with all aspects of their life, because there may be things that we can support with or signpost to that that person may not have even thought of. So I definitely think that is super important.
I mean, when we talk about, I can swear again, when you're diagnosed, is every single bit about your life, first. And so look at the person holistically, like you say, and signpost where necessary. And then they'll start taking on board the information around, the biology of your HIV diagnosis and what's happening in your body. And that's a whole nother bag of things to take on. And you can't take it all on at once. I found it incredibly difficult to take it all on. But if you start to talk to the person first, you bring down those barriers and you open those ears.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today, Mark. It's been
absolute pleasure.
Super important. And I'm just really grateful that there is people like yourself that is willing to speak so openly and candidly about HIV, and to put information out there to support other people and educate. And the world is a better place with people like you in it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I just hope that this video supports people that, maybe at various different stages with their education or the various different parts of their journey living with HIV. And I just hope it kind of raises awareness and signposts people to areas that they may need support with.
I hope so too. And let's remember, it's a journey for everyone.